I came home to a hole where my driveway used to be. Not cracked, not damaged, not under construction. Gone. I remember just sitting there in my truck with the engine running, staring through the windshield like maybe my eyes needed a second to adjust, like maybe the late afternoon sun was playing tricks on me. But no. Where there had been 30 feet of poured concrete that I'd mixed and leveled myself 26 years earlier, there was now a muddy rectangle carved down to raw dirt. Tire tracks, shovel marks, broken chunks of gray concrete piled off to the side like somebody had dug up a body and tried to tidy the scene. My mailbox was leaning sideways, and stuck in the center of that dirt crater was a laminated notice on a wooden stake. I turned the truck off. The quiet felt wrong. The paper flapped in the wind while my hazard lights blinked behind me, reflecting off my neighbor's brand new brick pavers across the street. Identical red patterns, neat, expensive, perfectly aligned like a suburban chessboard. Every driveway on my block looked the same now. Every driveway except mine, or what used to be mine. The notice read, non-compliant surface. Removal authorized. Approved paver installation required within 30 days. Authorized by the Ridgemont Estates Homeowners Association. That was the moment something in me went very still. I built that driveway with my father the summer before he passed. Back when this place wasn't Ridgemont Estates. Back when it was just a stretch of farmland outside Cedar Ridge, Kansas, before developers carved it into tidy parcels and put decorative stone signs at the entrance. We poured that concrete by hand because we couldn't afford to hire a crew. My wife, Claire, was 8 months pregnant with our oldest at the time. I remember her bringing us lemonade in the heat and laughing at how serious we were about leveling that slab. My kids learned to ride bikes on that driveway. I chalked free throw lines at the end of it so we could shoot hoops after dinner. On Saturdays, I'd wash the truck there, hose spraying across the concrete, water running into the grass. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't trendy. But it was ours. And now it looked like a construction site that nobody bothered to clean up. Across the street, my neighbor Colin stepped out onto his porch, coffee mug in hand. He looked uncomfortable, like he'd been waiting for me. "Hey man," he called. "You just getting in?" "Looks that way," I said, not taking my eyes off the hole. He shifted his weight. "They came around 9 this morning. Big crew. Said they had authorization." "From who?" He hesitated. "The board. Of course. The Ridgemont Estates Homeowners Association had been circling my driveway for months. Ever since they voted to standardize exterior surfaces. Uniform brick pavers installed by one approved contractor, Terrastone Design Group. The same contractor whose yard signs popped up on every lawn after installation. The same contractor whose owner just happened to play golf every other Thursday with our HOA president, Denise Harper. Denise moved into the neighborhood 5 years ago when the last phase of development wrapped up. Former corporate compliance officer, always smiling but never quite warm, clipboard tucked under her arm like an accessory. She talked about protecting property values the way some people talk about religion. My driveway, she said at a meeting last spring, did not align with the aesthetic direction of the community. Aesthetic direction. I stood in my own front yard now, boots sinking slightly into damp soil where concrete used to be, and I could feel the anger climbing my spine slow and steady. I walked up to the laminated notice and pulled it out of the dirt. At the bottom was a line that made my jaw tighten. Failure to comply may result in further corrective action at homeowner expense. Further corrective action. They had already jackhammered private property while I was at work. I pulled my phone out and scrolled back through old emails. There had been notices, sure. Letters about non-compliant surfaces and upcoming improvement initiatives. I'd responded each time the same way. My driveway predated the HOA incorporation. It was structurally sound. It met county code. And I would not be paying $15,000 to replace perfectly good concrete with decorative bricks so the street could look like a catalog spread. At the last meeting, Denise had smiled at me across the folding tables in the clubhouse. "Mr. Bennett," she said in that polished voice, "uniformity enhances collective value." "My house isn't a stock portfolio," I told her. "It's where my kids grew up." There had been a little murmur around the room. Some sympathetic looks. Some annoyed ones. She leaned closer. "The covenants allow the board to enforce compliance." "Enforce doesn't mean demolish," I said. Apparently, to her, it did. I walked the perimeter of the crater, noticing something that made my stomach drop in a different way. Along the edge closest to the side yard, the crew had dug deeper than necessary. There was exposed conduit. Thick black cable that shouldn't have been visible. They'd scraped the soil back far enough that the protective covering was nicked. And that cable mattered. When my grandfather sold portions of this land to developers in the early 90s, he retained a small section where our house sits. Part of the agreement with the county utility company involved installing a main transformer near the corner of our lot. It fed power to the original farm structures and later to the subdivision once it expanded. There was an easement, signed and notarized, granting access for maintenance, but also stipulating that any excavation within a designated radius required coordination with the property holder. That property holder was now me. I hadn't thought about that easement in years. It was just paperwork in a folder in my filing cabinet. The transformer sat behind a short chain-link fence near my oak tree, humming quietly through every season. But now the conduit running from that transformer toward the street was partially exposed because someone wanted brick pavers. Colin walked over, lowering his voice. They didn't call the utility first. I asked one of the guys. He said they had HOA approval, and that was enough. I crouched near the cable and brushed dirt away gently. The outer insulation was scuffed. Not severed, but compromised. They can't just do that, Colin muttered. No, I said quietly. They can't. Inside the house, Claire listened while I explained what happened. She didn't yell. She just sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. They went onto our property while you were at work, she said slowly. Yeah. And destroyed something you built with your dad. Yeah. She nodded once, then looked up at me. What are you going to do? I looked out the window toward the transformer fence and the torn earth around it. For months I had played defense. Ignored letters. Argued at meetings. Tried to be reasonable. Standing in that mud earlier, something shifted. I'm going to make a phone call, I said. The next morning I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call Denise. I called the power company. I dug out the old easement paperwork first, the one my grandfather had framed for a while, because he was proud of negotiating it without getting steamrolled. The document was yellowing at the edges, but the language was clear. Any excavation within 10 feet of the primary conduit required prior coordination with the easement holder and utility oversight. Failure to do so constituted unauthorized interference with critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure. I sat at the kitchen counter with that phrase echoing in my head and dialed the emergency line. Midstate Electric, this is Carla. A woman answered, calm, practiced. Hi, I said. My name's Daniel Bennett. I'm the easement holder for the primary transformer at 1847 Willow Bend. There's been unauthorized excavation on my property, and the main conduit has been exposed and potentially damaged. There was a pause. Typing. Sir, are you reporting an immediate hazard? I'm reporting that a demolition crew hired by my homeowners association jackhammered my driveway yesterday without coordinating with me or the utility, and they've compromised the soil around the feeder line. Another pause, longer this time. Please hold. I stared at the oak tree outside while the line clicked and soft instrumental music filled my ear. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, focused. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't ranting. I was simply stating facts. A man came on the line. This is Greg in field operations. Can you repeat the address? I did. And you're the recorded easement holder? Yes, sir. Was there visible damage to the conduit? Insulation scuffed. Soil displaced. No inspection performed before excavation. He exhaled slowly. All right. We'll dispatch a crew. For safety, we may need to temporarily de-energize the feeder line until we verify integrity. How many homes are on that line? I asked, though I already knew. Looks like 23 residential properties. That would be the entire street, I said. Understood. The truck pulled up around 11:30. Two utility workers in hard hats walked the perimeter with serious faces. They didn't care about brick pavers. They didn't care about HOA aesthetics. They cared about liability and public safety. One of them crouched where I had the day before. Who dug this? He asked. HOA contractor. He shook his head. No locate marks. No utility flagging. That's not good. They opened the transformer box, ran diagnostics, made phone calls. Around noon, one of them approached me. Mr. Bennett, given the exposure and lack of prior coordination, we're required to shut down this segment until a full safety inspection is completed and responsibility is clarified. Could be a few days. Do what you need to do, I said. At 12:17 p.m., the street went quiet. It's amazing how loud silence can be. Air conditioners cut off mid-hum. Garage doors froze. The faint background buzz that you never notice until it's gone just vanished. A couple of seconds later, I heard someone across the street shout, "What the hell?" Phones started coming out. Doors opened. People stepped onto lawns blinking like the sun had gotten brighter without the hum of electricity behind it. Colin looked over at me from his porch, eyes wide. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just stood there. Within 20 minutes, a mid-state electric notice was taped to the entrance sign. Temporary service interruption due to safety hazard involving unauthorized excavation. Estimated restoration pending investigation. That word spread faster than any HOA newsletter ever had. By evening, the neighborhood group chat was on fire. Claire read messages aloud while I grilled chicken on a propane burner I hadn't used in years. Does anyone know what's happening? My freezer is full of food. I work from home. This is insane. Somebody said it has to do with Daniel's property. There it was. My property. Around 8 that night, Denise texted me for the first time ever. "Daniel, can you please call me immediately? This outage is affecting the entire community." I let it sit for a while. Watched the sky turn orange. Listened to crickets instead of compressors. When I finally called her, she picked up on the first ring. "What did you do?" she demanded, skipping hello entirely. I reported unauthorized excavation near critical electrical infrastructure. I said evenly. "You called the power company?" "Yes." "You blindsided the board. You jackhammered my driveway." Silence. Then, sharper, "We were enforcing compliance under the covenants. You've been non-responsive for months." I responded every time. I said, "I told you I wouldn't replace structurally sound concrete for cosmetic reasons." It's not cosmetic. It's about maintaining uniform standards that protect. "Denise," I cut in, keeping my voice calm. "Your contractor dug into soil around a primary feeder line without contacting the easement holder or the utility. That's not standards. That's negligence." She lowered her voice slightly. "You're punishing 22 other families. I didn't hire a demolition crew. You could have warned us." "I did. At the meeting. I said enforcement doesn't mean demolish." She exhaled, long and frustrated. "What do you want?" That was the first honest question she'd asked me. "I want my driveway restored to its original specifications. Concrete, not pavers. I want written acknowledgement that the HOA overstepped. And I want the contractor to cover any utility inspection costs." "That's unreasonable," she said immediately. "What's unreasonable?" I replied, "is coming onto my property while I'm at work and tearing out something I built with my father." There was a flicker of something in her silence then. Not quite guilt. Not quite understanding. More like recalculation. "We'll discuss it at an emergency board meeting," she said finally. "You do that," I said. Meanwhile, the utility company is following protocol. Day 2 was hotter. Without air conditioning, houses started to feel like greenhouses. Generators sold out at the hardware store 15 miles away. I saw extension cords snaking across lawns to power refrigerators off borrowed units. People who had barely spoken to each other in years were suddenly knocking on doors asking for ice. Colin came over mid-afternoon. "You really lit the fuse," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to hurt anybody," I replied. But I'm done being pushed." He nodded slowly. "You know some folks are blaming you." I figured. "And some are quietly glad someone finally stood up to the board." That surprised me less than it should have. Over the past couple of years, Denise and the board had tightened rules bit by bit. Approved paint palettes, fence height restrictions, holiday decoration timelines. Small things, each defensible on its own, but together they shifted the tone of the neighborhood from community to compliance. My driveway had become symbolic, not because it was beautiful, but because it was different. That evening, 3 board members showed up at my door along with Denise. No clipboard this time. No polite smiles. "Can we come in?" she asked. We stayed on the porch. "This outage is escalating," one of the board members said. "We have residents threatening legal action." "So do I," I replied. Denise folded her arms. "If you withdraw the complaint and allow the paver installation to proceed, we can expedite restoration." I actually laughed at that. Not loud, just a single disbelieving breath. "You destroyed my property," I said. "And your solution is for me to pay $15,000 for the privilege?" "It's about community cohesion," she insisted. "It's about control," I said quietly. The words hung there heavier than I expected. For a moment, the mask slipped. If we let one homeowner ignore standards, The entire structure weakens, she said. So you make an example of me. She didn't answer. Behind them, down the street, I could see people sitting on porches fanning themselves. Kids playing outside because screens were dark. The neighborhood felt older somehow. Stripped back. Denise's voice softened, just a little. Daniel, this isn't personal. It became personal when you tore up something that mattered to me. The board members exchanged looks. Power can't be restored without the easement holder's clearance, I added. That's not my rule. That's the document your contractor ignored. Day 3 brought tension you could taste. Refrigerators were failing. A couple who both worked remote were packing laptops into their car to drive to a relative's house 2 towns over. The group chat turned from confused to angry. Who authorized excavation without utility clearance? Was the board even allowed to do that? Why are we paying dues if this is how they operate? That afternoon, Midstate Electric called me with an update. Inspection confirms soil destabilization around conduit, Greg said. Repairs required. Liability still under review. How long? I asked. Depends on who assumes responsibility and authorizes work. Translation, this could drag. Around sunset, I saw Denise walking toward my house alone. No entourage. No board members. Just her. Denise didn't knock right away. She stood at the edge of what used to be my driveway and looked down at the dirt, like she was finally seeing it not as a line item, not as a non-compliant surface, but as something that had been there a long time before she showed up with a clipboard and a 5-year plan. When she did knock, it was softer than I'd ever heard. Claire squeezed my hand once before I stepped outside. Up close, Denise looked tired. Not angry, not polished, just worn down. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her usual sharp posture had sagged a little. I didn't realize about the easement, she said without preamble. I figured, I replied. We relied on Terrastone to handle permits and utility checks. You relied on a contractor who benefits from every driveway he replaces, I said, not raising my voice. She nodded, just once. That's fair. The admission surprised me. Behind her, down the street, I could hear a generator coughing to life and then sputtering out again. A baby crying somewhere. The low murmur of neighbors talking in the dusk. This is spiraling, she said. People are furious. Some at you. Most at the board. I didn't ask for any of this. I know. There was a long pause. The kind where pride and practicality wrestle it out. What would it take, she asked finally, to resolve this tonight? I had thought about that question more than I expected over the past 48 hours. Not because I wanted to punish anyone, but because once you pull a lever like this, you better know why you did it. I want my driveway restored exactly as it was, I said. Concrete. Same footprint. Same finish. Paid for by the HOA and Terrastone jointly. She inhaled slowly but didn't interrupt. I want written acknowledgement that the board authorized demolition without proper utility coordination. Posted publicly to the residents. Her jaw tightened slightly. And I want the HOA to amend the covenant language so pre-existing structures that meet county code can't be forcibly replaced for aesthetic reasons alone. That one hit harder. You're asking us to weaken enforcement authority, she said. I'm asking you to stop confusing uniformity with value. The oak leaves rustled above us. Somewhere down the block, someone clapped sarcastically, probably not realizing we could hear. Denise looked back at the street, then at the dirt crater, then at me. People's food is spoiling, she said quietly. Medications are warming up. There's an elderly couple 2 houses down who rely on powered medical equipment at night. That landed. I hadn't known about the medical equipment. I swallowed. I never wanted anyone hurt. I believe you, she said. For a second, I considered backing off entirely, telling the utility to restore power and dealing with the driveway later in court, taking the high road. But then I pictured coming home to that hole again. The message it sent. The precedent it set. Denise, I said, keeping my voice steady, you crossed a line. Not just legally. Ethically. If I roll over now, the next time someone paints their front door the wrong shade, what happens? You send a crew while they're at work? She didn't answer that. Instead, she said, if we agree to concrete restoration and cover inspection costs, can we handle the rest in a closed session rather than a public post? There it was. Reputation. This community deserves transparency, I replied. You talk about protecting property values. Trust affects value more than brick patterns. We stood there in the fading light, 2 stubborn adults representing 2 different ideas of what a neighborhood should be. Finally, she nodded. I'll call an emergency vote. If it passes, will you contact Midstate tonight? Yes. On speaker, she added. With me present. Fair. She walked back down the street, phone already in hand. An hour later, the board reconvened at the clubhouse. Windows opened because there was no air conditioning. Residents gathered outside on folding chairs, waiting. Word had spread that something was happening. Colin texted me, "You coming?" I looked at Claire. She raised an eyebrow. Might as well finish what you started. So we walked. When we arrived, the clubhouse was lit only by battery lanterns. It felt almost camp-like, except the tension was thick enough to chew. Denise stood at the front. No microphone, just her natural voice. We authorized demolition of a non-compliant driveway without confirming utility clearance, she said plainly. That decision resulted in a safety shutdown affecting all homes on Willow Bend. A ripple moved through the room. We failed to verify easement requirements. That was an oversight. Oversight was a generous word, but it was something. She continued, the board is voting to fully restore the Bennett driveway to its original concrete specifications at no cost to the homeowner, to cover all associated utility inspection and repair expenses, and to amend covenant language regarding pre-existing structures. Murmurs. A few claps. A couple of tight expressions. The vote passed 4-1. Denise walked over to me afterward, extending her phone. Let's call. Greg answered on the second ring. Midstate Electric. This is Denise Harper, president of Ridgemont Estates HOA, she said carefully. We accept responsibility for unauthorized excavation and authorize immediate repair coordination. The easement holder is present. I stepped closer. Daniel Bennett here. I confirm access and request expedited restoration. There was some back and forth about scheduling crews at first light, safety checks, paperwork. But the tone had shifted. It was cooperative now. Power came back the next evening. You could hear it before you saw it. The collective hum of air conditioners restarting. Porch lights flicking on one by one. A small cheer rolled down the street like we'd just won a minor championship. Colin raised a beer toward me from his driveway. Guess concrete's making a comeback, he shouted. I laughed for the first time in days. A week later, a new slab was poured. I stood there while the crew smoothed it out, the smell of wet cement mixing with summer air. It looked almost identical to the old one. Same width. Same clean edge along the grass. Different story underneath. Denise stopped by during the pour. No clipboard. Just hands in her pockets. I meant what I said, she told me. It wasn't supposed to be personal. I know, I said. But it felt like it. She nodded. The amendment vote passed. You're not the only one who had concerns. That didn't surprise me. Neighborhoods are funny things. People move in for good schools, quiet streets, investment security. Somewhere along the way, you can forget the point isn't the uniform brick pattern. It's the people who park on top of it. Do I regret cutting the power? That's the question people still debate at block parties. Some say I overreacted, that I punished families who had nothing to do with the decision. Others say it was the only language the board understood. Here's what I know. If I had quietly paid 15 grand and let them replace my driveway, nothing would have changed. The next homeowner who pushed back would have faced the same treatment. And maybe next time the excavation would have been deeper, more dangerous. I didn't wake up wanting to turn my street into a blackout zone. I woke up wanting to protect something that mattered to me. Sometimes standing up for yourself ripples outward in ways you can't control. Sometimes those ripples force conversations that should have happened years earlier. Now when I pull into my driveway, I don't just see concrete. I see a line that got drawn and held. And every time I hear that low electrical hum from the transformer by the oak tree, I'm reminded that power runs deeper than people think. So I'm curious what you think. Did I go too far? Should I have handled it quietly through lawyers and paperwork instead of pulling a lever that shut down the whole block? Or was it justified, given they stepped onto my property and made a decision for me? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd expect, and I genuinely want to know where you land on it. And if you've ever had a run-in with an HOA or a neighborhood dispute that spiraled further than you imagined, share that too. These communities we live in, they can either bring out the best in us or the worst. If this story made you think or reminded you of something you've been dealing with, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. I've got a few more stories about property lines, power plays, and what happens when ordinary people decide they're done being pushed around. Because sometimes the most interesting battles aren't fought in courtrooms. They're fought in driveways.